In Our Mother's House by Patricia Polacco. When my mothers told me how they brought me home to live with them shortly after I was born, their eyes would shine and glisten, and they'd grin from ear to ear. They told me how they had walked across dry, hot deserts, sailed through turbulent seas, over tall mountains, and trekked through fierce storms just to bring me home. Then they'd get all teary in their eyes, and they'd tell me what it was like to hold me in their arms for the first time. 3 years after I was born, my brother Will came to us. He was just so tiny and 3 days old. Then there was Millie. We always kidded our mothers had found her under a lily pad in an enchanted pond deep in the hidden forest. She became part of our family when she was 2 months old, 3 years after Will had come. Our mothers were so different from each other that all of us often wondered how they found each other at all. Meemaw was short and stout. Her family was Italian, so she loved to cook, and she loved to sew upstairs on a noisy old machine. Meemaw was a pediatrician, and whenever any of us got sick, she always knew exactly what to do to make us feel better. Marmie was tall and thin. She could fix anything and organized everything. She made lists, posted chores on the refrigerator, and kept the house so clean and tidy. We used to kid her that if we got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, she'd make our beds before we could come back to them. Marmie was a paramedic who rode in an ambulance. Whenever there was any kind of an emergency, she always remained calm and took charge. We lived in a big old brown street in Berkeley, California. When we walked into our mother's house, the first thing we saw was the staircase. All of us slid down the banisters. Once Will was sliding so fast that he couldn't stop at the bottom. He flew off and took the finial with him. The most favored place for us kids was the sunroom above the carport. That is where all of our toys lived. It was where we played dress-up and where every Halloween costume we wore began. No store-bought costumes for us. Marmie and Millie designed them, and Meemaw would help us sew them. One year we went as wild animals. Hardly any of our neighbors recognized us at all. That is, except Mrs. Lochner. She knew us all right. She glared at us when she opened the door. She glared at our mothers, too. Her kids came running and were really excited to see us, but Mrs. Lochner turned her back and shut the door. "What's the matter with her?" Will blurted out, but our mother said nothing and continued down the block. One of the best things about our mother's house was the treehouse that we built in the backyard. Practically the entire neighborhood helped us. It all started with Will, who, like Marmie, always was wanting to build things. One Saturday, he found some plans for a treehouse in a magazine and went to her. It took several weeks to finish, but the Saturday night that we did finish, all of us kids got to sleep. Lochner kids were invited, but their parents came and got them. They barely spoke to us, just pulled them down the driveway. They just plain didn't like us, I guessed. I couldn't quite understand why. We always tried to be respectful and friendly, the way our mothers taught us to be. The kitchen in our house was the center of everything that was happening in our household. The kitchen doorway was where us kids got measured each year. Meemaw and Marmie's handwriting is still there even now. And all of our family holidays began in the kitchen. Our grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins usually came for the weekend. Our Italian grandpa was in charge of cooking. We all loved gnocchi. One of the nistiest things that happened in our neighborhood was the Woolsey Street Block Party. It was a tradition. For that one, Millie and I made all of the invitations by hand, and Meemaw took us around to deliver them from door to door. Everyone was invited. When we stopped at the Lochner's house, their mother glared at us the way she always did. "Why doesn't that lady like us, Meemaw?" I asked my mother. She just smiled at me and hugged. "I like you, baby," she said, and we went on our way. At the end of the day, when everyone was cleaning up from the block party and getting ready to sit in our backyard and just talk, Meemaw looked up to see Mrs. Lochner coming down the street. The Lochners had been invited but hadn't come. She planted her feet squarely in front of our mothers. "I don't appreciate what you two are," she snarled at Meemaw and Marmie. "What's the matter with her, Mama? What's the matter with her?" Millie kept saying. All the neighbors closed in on us. "She is full of fear, sweetie. She's afraid of what she cannot understand. She doesn't understand us," Marmie quietly said. "There seems to be no love in her heart either," whispered Marmie. The neighbors agreed, and one by one, they hugged our mothers. There wasn't a day in my life I feel deeply loved and wanted by Meemaw and Marmie. Our mothers were willing to do anything for us. We knew this. From the day we entered our mother's house, they prepared us for the day that we would leave it. I was the first when I left to go away to medical school. Then Will left to study engineering. Our Millie went all the way to New York to become a fashion designer. Of course, our hearts never left our mother's house, and over the years, Will, Millie, and I returned to be married in the garden back under the treehouse. We celebrated holidays together there, sang at birthday parties there, cried together when we lost our grandparents. When the three of us had our babies, all of them took their first steps in front of that clinker brick fireplace in their living room. They fell into the waiting arms of our grandmothers, just as we had done. We watched our mothers grow old together in that house. They passed away within a year of each other. Will, Millie, and I placed them together in a green hillside overlooking the bay, where near the place they had pledged their love to each other so many years ago. Will and his family live in our mother's house now. We are so pleased that it didn't go to strangers and that it is still a gathering place for all of us and our families. The walls still whisper our mother's names. All of our hearts find peace whenever we are there, not only remembering them, but being there together in our mother's house.